Welcome to the Queens Connexus podcast. Queens Connexus, we're an organization here in Queens that is collaborating together, partnering together across different denominational lines, across different theologies, across different specific neighborhoods, partnering together for the sake of advancing the kingdom of God here in Queens. My name is Jonathan, and this is Lester.
Yes.
Lester, what's up, man?
How you doing?
Good.
I like your outfit.
Thanks. I
love the setup too. Yeah, this is very nice.
Yeah.
Look at this.
You play music?
No, absolutely not. Do you want to play something?
No, let's stay on topic.
I think you should play the kazoo.
Moving on. So, Lester, tell us a little bit about yourself. Yeah. I'll tell a little bit about myself, and then we'll talk about why are we starting a podcast.
Yeah. You know what's confusing? I think I get this question a lot, like, what do I do? I don't really know what I do. I love starting businesses, but for the sake of ministry. So when I think of businesses, I'm thinking about ministry. I'm thinking about how do Christians create platforms for other Christians to stand on, and how does that benefit the rest of the community? So I'm really big on that. So I feel like I'm not really sure how to explain it. I just love creating things, you know? I have a title company. There's a random...
What are some things you've created?
Yeah, huh?
What are some things you've created?
Like the title company is, in Bayside right now. There's a headquarters there. That's real estate. And then there's churches. There's nonprofits. There.
You created churches?
Created churches, you know.
I thought Jesus did that, but okay.
You create them. And I like to create platforms, just people to gather. I think that's really cool. Getting to know people's ideas. I really want to encourage Christians to start cool things so that it benefits themselves and also other people. I'm a co-church planter with David Chung, who started the Queens Connexus. We planted a church in Elmhurst and another church plant from there. And so that's something that's fun. We have a roastery in the neighborhood now, and that also is ran by, Christians and for the neighborhood. But it's been really exciting just do things like that.
So you've started a lot of things in a lot of different areas with the focus of ministry, which is awesome. What is something you said you like starting things? What is something that you thought was a great idea that you tried to start and wasn't successful?
Oh, that's good. I would say maybe like apps. I think apps is like a really cool thing, but
did you try to start?
Yeah. Like hundreds of thousands of dollars. Like it just doesn't. I don't really understand it. I think I still want to keep trying because I feel like that's
what
the next.
Be?
It's just I would start with real estate.
Okay.
I would love to go into the counseling world with that because I know it's happening. Zillow? Did I start with Zillow?
Yeah.
No. Is that allowed? Are we allowed to say that? And do we need to pay royalty if we say that here?
I don't think they're going to be watching our podcast just yet.
But that's something I feel like, I've tried, but didn't go anywhere. But I just always feel like there's somebody who's willing to run that. Like, I don't know how to run things. I know how to start things, and I run away.
Okay. Lastly and quickly along these lines, what is one of the things you're most proud of starting?
Probably the church, but I think it's because along the way I've learned to not do things alone. So I think meeting David is just really helpful because I never thought about how working with another person is so much stronger. Yeah, so I think that's really cool.
Cool.
Yeah. What about you, Jonathan? Tell us about you.
Jonathan Nason.
Yes.
I pastor New Hope Church. And we're in the process of also be the launch pastor of Cross Island Church. I haven't told you this yet. Well, I've told you about the church plant, that we came up with a name, Cross Island Church.
Awesome.
Out in Long Island. I know that's outside of the Queens area, so you don't care about it, but whatever. I still care about it.
Oh my goodness. You're right, I don't care.
We are Queens Connexus, so that's cool. Fair. So we're helping launch that church, as well as pastoring. What else? I'm a full-time student. Have been for a long time. My kids ask me, "Are you in 18th grade by now or something?" I'm like, "Well, they stopped calling it numbers after 12th
yes,
grade."
I am.
But yes, that's about where I'm at.
That's so funny. Tell us what you do at Queens Connexus, actually.
Yeah, so at Queens Connexus, My role as manager oversees kind of creating resources. Our church planning residency, which is kind of under the umbrella of resources of This podcast is kind of under the umbrella of resources, as well as our fellowship and our pastor's devotion that meets on Wednesday. Yeah. So the things related around training and resources is kind of my focus.
Yeah, and you're also running like a church planting residency. Yeah. With people from the neighborhood, which is really cool, and that really is like your gift. Before we even hired you from the board, it was like really cool to see your gift with that. Yeah, you've done that before. You've done podcasting before. Like this is really your passion.
Yeah, I articulate my mission as multiplying leaders and preachers for gospel saturation. Yeah, and so it is my dream, my desire to allow my life to be leveraged to pastor and preach the gospel, yes, but also to train up other leaders who will do the same. Yeah. And so that's kind of where even just the dream for this podcast is just in the lane of this isn't sufficiently training preachers and leaders, but it is a resource that's there to help encourage and help maybe along the lines create some specific content that would be helpful. Which leads us to this question of why are we starting this podcast? How do we get to this moment?
How did we get here?
It's a fun moment. It's fun.
I mean, yeah.
Shows a little bit of the evolution of our friendship. And
long story short, yeah. So we met because Jay Harvey invited me to your house one evening, and I just showed up. And I remember that was the first time I was like, man, this guy's really good at discipling and training, because you had a bunch of these men in your house and just really good. And I was like, who is this guy that just loves to train and like you're very patient with everybody? Anyway, so then moved on, and then like a couple of months after, whatever, then we met, and then I would say from there, then you started coming to our devotionals, and then I got to know you a little bit more. In the midst of that, I was trying to find out what to do with my life. So this is like a midlife crisis. Anyway, so then I was like, what am I gonna do for myself? My counselor, my coach was like, what do you want? And I was like, I don't know how to answer that. Like, I really don't know. I'm much better at finding out what people want and then making that happen and then disappear, you know? So I have a neighbor here, also a friend, Andy. He came up with this one evening, and he was sitting in the kitchen with me, and then he was like, you know what, you have so many things to say about like all these topics that you should start a podcast. And I'm like, I have no idea what that is. Like, that's so weird. I've never listened to a podcast. I'm 40 now, so I'm like, I have no idea what a podcast was or is. Or now I know.
That's good, because we're doing one.
We're doing. So I'm like, what does that mean? Because all I would do is just complain. You know, so many things in a church environment. I'm like, this is not cool. That's not fair. Then my coach was like, Lester, you got to do it. If this is how you need to improve, then just do it. And I remember we were talking about this once, and you're like, oh, you've done this in the past, and you know, like you really enjoy this stuff. I don't like doing things alone. So we talked about this at Donovan's over, you know.
Donovan's great inside.
Yeah, the burgers are great.
The Guinnesses are great.
Are you allowed to say that?
I did.
The Guinness, I almost said Guinness. I was like, the burgers are great.
Burgers are great as well.
Great. And then that's how this happened. We're like, yeah, like we should really try this. And I shared with you about, I don't really have a platform for just my thoughts. Yeah. I'm not really good at that. I much rather create that with somebody. So I think when that happened, it was really, it was very enlightening to be like, oh, I could do this with somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, as you were talking at the beginning of saying, hey, I like to create things. It really was, from my perspective, going through that journey of going, hey, I feel like there's a room and there's a lane. I feel like there's resources we need to create. I feel like there's conversations that need to be had publicly, that we can talk about some difficult things. And then we're sitting there talking, and you're talking about the podcast. And so you have the ability to make it happen. You're like, hey, we could do this, we could do this, we can make it happen. And so I'm grateful for your friendship. I'm grateful that I do think that night was fun just as a friends, but also as a moment where I think it was a cool opportunity of the Lord bringing us together to say, hey, for the sake of seeing the church strengthen, for the sake of seeing what Queens Connexus is about come to fruition, here's an idea, and we're going to give it a run. So we decided, let's do it. Let's try it.
Yeah, we did.
Hopefully someone's listening. I know my mom will listen. You know, somebody will listen. Somebody's going to listen. Anyway, so I always tell preachers, that's why I made the joke. I always tell preachers, the first time you preach, if no one listens, at least someone in your family might, So for me, that's my mama.
We'll see that 1 or 2 views on YouTube.
Yeah. So we decided we're going to start the podcast. What are some things that we want to talk about? What are some things that are coming? What are some things you're passionate that you feel like were important to talk about?
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, I'm not strategic at all. I just like to run and, so Jonathan sat me down and was like, you need to write down what you like to talk about. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so difficult, so as I was writing it down, I was like, oh, there are things that we should be talking about that I feel like, especially in Queens with immigrants in mind and immigrant upbringing, that we are afraid to talk about. And I think one really important is just mental health, counseling. What does that look like? Because what's happening is that a lot of us grew up in unhealthy, toxic, or abusive environments, and then you become leaders in churches. And that's actually not really cool, because then all of that, the trauma, the toxicity seeps into your congregation, because now you have authority.
So we're going to do a podcast with Judy Cha.
Judy Cha, which is amazing. She's director at Redeemer Counseling Services, has a book. And I've benefited so much from them, even as a person that gets counseling from them. Really, really helpful, because I'm like, man, all these years, 20 years of ministry right now, and I'm going, I've really messed up, because of my stress. When I'm stressed, I take it out and my power idol comes out, and I'm like, I must exercise my power. It's really dangerous. Definitely. So that's one, pastor's salary.
Yeah.
Why is that something that, you as a pastor, I'm not a pastor, pastors are a lot of my friends are pastors. I'm like, why are the churches saying, well, your treasure's in heaven? So we can't afford you, then you don't get paid. Yeah. And your wife or your spouse should be also playing the piano for free, leading a Bible study, it's not cool.
Yeah, we face, in Queens specifically, we do face a number of financial obstacles. Yeah. One, just the cost of the city and the cost of living here, the cost of ministry, the cost of having space to gather in and worship. But then some of the things you mentioned aren't necessarily cost to the city as much as they are cultural to different cultures and how they interpret pastors. And so when you have all these various cultures mixing, there's a lot of different ideas and opinions and ways about going about funding and supporting ministry leaders, some good, some bad. Yep. And so we want to talk about that. Absolutely. And we want to look at that from cultural perspectives and as well as biblical theological perspectives.
And absolutely, I feel like my goal is always to push the envelope to the very end, so that hopefully it bounces back to the middle where it should be. Yeah. So when I think about that, I'm like, well, some pastors, they do choose and feel that they, maybe not have to be paid so much. But also I'm going, well, at the church's end, the leadership, you should be thinking about how to take care of this worker of God, take care of them and their family, so that their family is not resenting the church for taking their husband away, or even something like friendship. Why is friendship not talked about? Yeah. Our culture is always to romanticize things, movies, weddings. Your sermons are all about, I have an example for you, me and my wife, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, why is it always about you and your wife? I would like to think about and hear things about your friendship. What about Jonathan and David in the Old Testament when there's 3 covenants made? Nobody talks about that covenant, but we only talk about the covenant made between husband and wife. Yeah.
So we're going to do an episode with Io, specifically on covenantal friendships and relationships. Yeah. Looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. And he has a really good covenant friend, that we've both witnessed. Just really cool, and they're amazing brothers.
Who's David?
That's right.
And we're going to have David on to talk about church planting with people who've grown up here in Queens.
Right.
So he's going to come on and talk about church planting. So we're going to talk about various leaders within church planting. And one of the things we see here in Queens or New York City in general is we have people, like myself included, who have moved in to serve the city. Yeah. And so we're going to do 2 separate podcasts, one with David on local indigenous church planters. That's what we mean by local, not that I'm technically local in the sense that I live and minister within my locale, but local in the sense that they've grown up in that location and now are trying to pastor in that location. So we'll do that with David, and then we're going to do with Larry Mayberry, pastor of Queens Church, church planting that comes from transplant leaders who move in and what that's like. He moved in and has been pastoring and serving in the city for
Right.
a decade now, and maybe 12 years or more. And so we're going to do that. So we're going to talk about different types of church plant leaders
Right.
in the coming episodes.
Yeah.
What else do you want to talk about?
I mean, there's so many things that I feel like we should be talking about, and it
Tell me
might
some.
cause
Tell
it
me
might
some.
cause some issues, but I don't know. Like,
But this is, I mean, that's part of, I mean, right. We want to be honorable. We want to be faithful. We want to not just gripe in things, because Scripture tells us not to do that.
Yeah.
But we also want to be critical for the sake of growth of the church.
Yeah.
And so we intentionally say we're doing this podcast not by any means because we want to grow a podcast. Like, the growth of the podcast is not our purpose and our goal. The purpose and our goal is to have some conversations that need to be had and to create a resource. For example, if we talk about finances, that you might have a ministry leader who it's really difficult to bring up their finances to their leaders, and they don't have anybody to advocate on their behalf, especially these smaller church plants and stuff. And so if we're able to create a podcast that could be beneficial, that he or she could share with a ministry leader around their salary and go, hey, here's some thoughts, here's some people here in Queens that understand. Well, that's a well-served podcast. It's a well-served episode as a resource. And so we do want to have those tough conversations, even if they're not, even if some people aren't happy or might.
and it's okay.
I don't know.
Yeah, and I actually feel like my coach tells me this all the time. He always tells me, like, complaining is not bad. It's just it's showing room for improvement, like what people are hopefully
That's good.
they need growth in. So I would like to at least complain with the hope that we're growing.
We're not just griping to gripe, but we want to be critical for the sake of growth.
Yeah. So definitely, I think there's like topics like that, or I don't know, like, what does community really look like? I feel like that word is used so much, but then when people are like, oh yeah, like I love living in community, and then the next day they move because they want to move to Long Island. Like, I'm like, well, you forgot about me and you treated me like a project, and that triggers my like immigrant mentality of like, my parents were always there, and you just like used me for this season in your life so you could feel better. But then now you're putting me second, third, or fourth place. And I'm like, why would I ever want to do community ever again? Yeah. Like, I've been hurt so many times because people keep leaving. I share my life with you, or like, doing life only on Sundays. Like, why? Yeah. It's another thing. Like, how do we balance that so it's not just Sundays and you're really doing life with me on the weekdays? I don't like it when, personally, I don't like it when people only hang out with me on Sundays. Then it's like, well, on weekdays, you never thought about me, and that's like hurtful. That's like an honestly, hurt. I would like to talk about that. I don't know. There's a lot of things. What would you like to talk? I know that there's also topics that you have. Yeah. I would love to hear what they are.
Well, I want to talk around specific ideas of just what does it mean for a church to be kingdom-minded? What does it mean for a church to be kingdom-focused? One of the things I love about Queens Connexus and that drew me to Queens Connexus is in our values, one of our values is cross-pollinating. Yeah. What we mean by that is different cultures, different people, different denominations. Yeah. Some of us get baptism right. Some of us get kidding, complete kidding. But I'm making a joke to say Baptist, Presbyterian. Yeah. That in some places those are divisions, but here, for the sake of the gospel, we recognize and honor the freedom of convictions around ideas of certain theologies. But we center and unite around Jesus, and we can partner and we can serve together for the city because there's so much gospel need in the world, but in our city that we love. And so I love that when we gather for our weekly devotionals and we gather for events. I know last fall we did a panel that had non-denomination, it had Baptist, it had Presbyterian, it had Lutheran, all gathering together to talk about how do we show hospitality and evangelism to our community. And so I'm just really grateful that there is a comfort around disagreeing on some things that we would say is important, but they don't divide us. Yeah. But we're united around Jesus and we collaborate and we partner together, we cross-pollinate in order to serve this city and help this city. And so I'm grateful for that about Queens Connexus. And so anything around partnering together, because we say at our church that we want to see 1% of the lostness of Queens decrease. Mm-hmm. So that was a weird sentence, but we want to see the lostness of Queens decrease by 1%. Yeah. And so currently only 4% of Queens would say that they are some type of Christians or follower of Jesus. Broad statement. Well, we want to see that go from 96% who say they don't follow Jesus at all to 95%. Well, 1% of people coming to know Christ is 24,000 people.
Right.
Arthur Ashe Stadium that does the U.S. Open seats 24,000 people. So when our church has a vision, individual church has a vision of seeing 24,000 people come to know Christ, we immediately go, that vision's beyond us. Mm-hmm. That's beyond our local church, but it's not beyond the church in Queens.
Right.
And so that casts a vision, and that Queens Connexus comes in and goes, we have that vision too. We want to see God move in that way. I can't do it on my own. We can't. We are the church together here in this city. Right. So there's a lot of topics around that I want us to unpack and just get excited about.
You know, as you're even talking about that, I think one, I love talking about just even with the baptism. I remember having that conversation with you, and I loved it because I'm really curious. Like, you know, like what's going on here, you know? Or even when I think about just one time Queens Connexus, we did like a donation of pots and pans to like a shelter. And it wasn't just one denomination. It was a bunch of pastors getting together in Queens and just donating, you know? And I remember just seeing that. And I was like, this is actually really cool. This isn't just one church. It's not like, you know, the same people. It was just different people focusing on those who are living with homelessness. Yeah. And it was really cool seeing that. I wonder what that'll look like if, let's say, all the pastors and churches got together in Queens and tackled a bigger issue. You know, with all the garbage, all the stuff set aside, like, you know, all the arguments, controversial things, like just set that aside and just be like, well, how do we care? Yeah,
absolutely. You know, another thing that I want us to talk about, or we will talk about and we'll do episodes on, is just the beauty of Queens itself. Just the history nerd in me. I love history. I love different things. And so just studying the neighborhoods and how they came about. And that's probably not for this podcast, but if you couple that history with also pastors from different regions. So we may do episodes where we bring in pastors from this community and this community within Queens and say, and I just want to know, hey, what is culture like there? Because Queens doesn't have one culture. New York City doesn't have one culture. How are you ministering? And that can create resources for pastors in those specific neighborhoods as well. As they come to the podcast, they might be able to find one specifically on Fresh Meadows, where I live, or on Elmhurst, where you live, and they can learn and meet pastors in that area. And you know, I think that could be beneficial. Yeah. Love to talk about the historical side of things and how Queens got to where it is, how churches got to where they are, and what's happening now.
Dang, that sounds really intelligent.
It sounds really nerdy. That was really nice of you.
Yeah, it was very intelligent.
That was very nice of you,
I'll sit that podcast out.
That was nice happening? Of you. That was very
I
nice.
feel history, so I don't know about this.
Yeah. Anyways, so yeah.
So I think those are like good topics that we most likely will be going through, and just even hearing what other people might want to talk about. And but there's just a lot here that I feel like we can't talk about, you know. Just because of a lot of us, I think even in Queens, like we grew up in churches with our parents. You know, we're just told what to do, and we can't we're always wondering why, you know, why do we have to do it this way? Or you're right, even hospitality that we just talked about, why do we have to do hospitality in a home? A lot of us don't have homes. Yeah. A lot of us live in a room. You know, so yeah, just things like that. I feel like we definitely should be kind of tackling and just kind of poke at and at least cause conversation and dialogue.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to the season ahead. I'm looking forward to continue to have conversations, to laugh, play music or whatever. I don't know. When this is here, I just assume people probably turn this on, this episode on, like, oh, they're going to play music. No, I'm not the person.
I'll get your kazoo, Jonathan.
But hey, looking forward to just what the season may come. For those that are listening, you can find out more about Queens Connexus at queensconnexus.org. We would also love to know, what do you want to talk about? And so you can email me at jonathan@queensconnexus.org and just say, hey, podcast idea. Here's some things. Here's a question I have. Here's some topics that I'd love to see you guys talk about. Here's something that we're dealing with at our church, but we don't really know how to address, or I feel kind of awkward being the person bringing it up because sometimes it's hard to advocate for yourself. It'd be really helpful if there's a resource I could point our leaders to, things like that. any of those ideas, again, Jonathan at queensconnexus.org, or you can just go to Queens Connexus and there's information how you can get in contact with us. If you are a pastor here in Queens, we meet weekly for our weekly devotionals on Wednesday mornings. We take seasons there where we take breaks and not take breaks. So depending on when you're listening to this, just go to our website, go to our Facebook, go to our Instagram, and just make sure there's not any announcement like, we're taking a break off or a break from it for Christmas or something like that. But we'd love for you to join us. That's for pastors at 9:30 on Wednesday morning, queensconnexus.org. Find a little bit more information about us. Thank you for listening. Bless you. Bless your churches. Let's go, Queens. That's a weird way to end that, but that's okay. This is us. This is us, Queens. I don't know. We'll stop now.